This is an American story. It's not unique by any means. Every major city in America has the exact same story. But this one is ours. Because we got so much history to cover here. Is this thing on? Oh, it is. Oh, okay. Well, I'm just going to do the Cliff Notes version. It's a complex history, but here we go. All right, so 1864, that's where this story begins. Before Nevada is even a state. As you know, the country's at war at this time, the Civil War. The southern states have seceded from the Union. They want to keep their 4 million slaves. Meanwhile, Abraham Lincoln, his whole thing is, how can America call herself the beacon of freedom whilst also having slaves within her borders? And contrary to popular belief, Lincoln was not popular at this time as a president, because while most Northerners agreed with his assessment on slavery, they were war weary. They're sending their sons and their husbands to war. A lot of them were willing to work out a deal with the South. But Lincoln stood firm. He said, nope, we're going to pass the 13th Amendment and slavery will be abolished in this country. But Lincoln is up for re-election in a few months, and he's not sure how it's going to work out because he's not going to get the electoral votes from the southern states because they're not even participating, and he's not sure that the Northerners are going to re-elect him. So him and his cabinet come up with the brilliant idea of looking to the West, seeing the Nevada territory, which is rich with silver and gold, and they say, you know what, let's make that a state. And on October 31st, 1864, just days before the election, they rushed Nevada into statehood. And partially because of that, he receives the electoral votes that he needs. He is reelected. The 13th Amendment is ratified, and Black people are free. So the next time you look at an American map, I want you to look at the state of Nevada and I want you to say, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Miss Clay T. White.
So my name is Clay T. White. I am not from Las Vegas, but this is my home. And my passion is collecting the history of this city, especially the history as it pertains to the African-American experience.
Once freed from bondage, many former slaves began to travel away from the southern states. While most would travel to the north to places like Detroit, Chicago, or New York, there were those who headed west. One of those westbound travelers was a man named John Howell.
He moved here from a small town in North Carolina named Tarboro, North Carolina.
According to the 1870 census, outside of the indigenous population, Howell was one of only a handful of residents who lived on the land that would become Las Vegas. For thousands of years, the area had been exclusively occupied by various indigenous tribes, predominantly the WWII tribe, better known as the Southern Paiute people. The attraction was the Las Vegas Springs. These springs were a natural freshwater system in the middle of the valley, left over from the last ice age. For thousands of years, this water source gave life to the indigenous tribes in the area, who set up their camps along its banks. Once European expansion discovered it, it became a regular stopover for travelers on the Spanish Trail.
The springs also spread out, if you will. There was a creek that ran northeast from the springs through the valley. And when people came through, they might stop at the springs. The Las Vegas Springs were the key to the valley.
In 1872, John Howell, along with his close friend J.B. Wilson, purchased a significant amount of land that included the springs. When Wilson decided to pursue his fortune elsewhere, Howell bought his half and became the sole owner of 320 acres of land that not only contained the area's only source of water, but was also abundant with goods to sell to passing travelers. John Howell had set up one of the first places of commerce in the Las Vegas Valley.
But he was more than just a landowner. He was also a freighter. He owned a freight company. At that time, of course, it was probably just a few wagons. That was the kind of entrepreneur he was. A rancher, he grew crops, he had a family here. But that land purchase is why we know him.
If you follow the title of the Springs, Howell's there. And he had a Paiute wife, and there were kids, but he doesn't leave a huge footprint. Then again, there aren't a lot of people who leave huge footprints in that era.
In 1876, John Howell sold the land to Octavius D. Gass and his wife Mary. He would go on to establish other ranches in the southern Nevada area, where he would live for the rest of his life. And sadly, even with his many pioneering contributions to the valley, to this day, there is very little to remember him by. Not a street, park, school, or building that bears his name to memorialize his existence. For the next few decades, post-war America was in the zenith of its second industrial revolution. Thousands of European immigrants poured into Ellis Island, seeking factory or agricultural work to provide better lives for their families. But by the year 1900, the largest employer in the country was the U.S. railroad industry. And by this time, in the valley that would become Las Vegas, the Springs remained the only attraction for travelers on their way to or from nearby cities. A mere stopover in the middle of an otherwise barren desert.
And that all dramatically changed in 1901 when a U.S. Senator, William Clark, decided that he was going to extend some of the railroad properties he had in Southern California. He was going to extend them to Salt Lake City and the Main Line. The largest railroad company in the United States at that time was the Union Pacific.
For John Thomas McWilliams, this was an opportunity.
J.T. McWilliams was a surveyor, civil engineer. McWilliams realized the railroad was going to come through here, and so he began to pick up some land with the idea that he would build his own townsite. And so he got about, I'm going to say somewhere 80 to 100 acres to the west of what is now downtown.
And in January of 1905, he starts advertising the Los Angeles newspapers, buy a lot in the original Las Vegas Townsite. And people started buying lots. And very quickly, it became a bustling community. It had bakeries, it had restaurants, it had hotels, it had saloons. So McWilliams Townsite was alive and well.
And he ends up eventually with the railroad competing with him for the townsite.
At the same time, the railroad is saying, wait a minute, we're going to put in a townsite. We're going to build a depot. We're going to build an ice plant. We're going to build railroad shops. By the way, we're going to put in a water system.
What made Clark more appealing than McWilliams, frankly, was the water rights. Clark and the Union Pacific had the Las Vegas Land and Water Company. This is the main water supply. And they ended up building pipes through the Clark Townsite, and you could get your water that way. The McWilliams Townsite, and mind you, anything else outside the Clark Townsite, you had to dig a well.
McWilliams didn't have those offerings. He had a couple of wells, but he wasn't offering a full water system.
He doesn't have the money behind him. So what can he offer in return? Not much.
In January of 1905, the railroad connecting Los Angeles to Salt Lake City was complete. And on May 15th of that same year, Clark held an auction on the east side of the tracks, luring over 3,000 prospective buyers.
Literally, within the next few weeks, the folks that had bought lots or were renting lots or were over at McWilliams Townsite began moving their businesses over into railroad's townsite called the Clark's Las Vegas Townsite.
Within 5 years, the small railroad town had a population of approximately 800, with about 100 of those being classified as non-white. Out of the 40 blocks that made up the Clark Townsite, Block 17 was where the black residents called home.
Block 17 is known as the area where some of the earliest African Americans lived in kind of the Las Vegas as the railroad town. So you're talking 1905 to 1910.
Largely, the black community settled in on Block 17 and the adjacent block, Block 32, as well as along the north side of Stewart Avenue.
What seems to happen is as black people come into a predominantly white space, one of the first things they do is they look for other black people. This is a source of survival and solidarity expressed amongst people.
And it's not officially segregated in the way that later you'd see West Las Vegas being segregated in that way, but it was segregated.
And the unique position of Block 17 is it was positioned right next to Block 16, which we would call the red light district.
At this time, Block 16 was the only area in town where gambling, liquor sales, and prostitution was permitted. It was also here that the earliest black-owned businesses would be established in the valley, and black performers from all over the country were invited to entertain as early as 1908. As far as entertainment, race-based discrimination did not exist in early Vegas. No matter if you were black, white, or otherwise, if you had $1 to spare, you were welcome to spend it. In June of 1911, Las Vegas officially became a city. As the once small railroad town grew and its population swelled, the growing number of non-white citizens began to become a concern to some.
There was already existing segregation in the primary industry in this community that was the financial backbone, and that was the railroad industry.
This is the 19th century, and when you get to the early 20th century, building the railroad is going to attract people. And there are blacks who work for the railroad, whether it's in the shops or in various other capacities.
If you were black, you were a porter, you were a cook, you were a laborer. You weren't an engineer. You didn't drive the train. You weren't a plumber or a pipe fitter.
Early Las Vegas was a melting pot, with Hispanic, Asian, white, and black citizens living amongst one another with little issue in those days. And life in the small railroad town would remain this way until the Roaring '20s came to a sudden halt.
In 1929, the stock market crashed, and all of a sudden, the community, the state of the United States, we go into a depression.
The Great Depression all but decimated American life. Factories closed, farms dried. Homelessness, alcoholism, crime, and suicide went through the roof. With no way to provide, many men abandoned their families, leaving scores of single mothers in their wake. Throughout America, hope seemed lost.
One of the ironies of the Great Depression is that it didn't hit Las Vegas in the same way it hit most of the rest of the country.
In 1931, construction began on the Boulder Dam project, just 37 miles outside of Las Vegas. As word spread, thousands of men from all over the country, many with their families in tow, dropped whatever they were doing to answer the call.
So the Hoover Dam project is basically what allows Las Vegas to grow during an era where most cities were hemorrhaging funds.
And the real problem at the beginning of the Depression in Las Vegas is the people pouring in here who want to work on the dam.
Overnight, the community of Las Vegas, literally overnight, within 12 months though, the population doubled.
So you have thousands of people migrating to this particular space in hopes of acquiring a government job.
The builders of Hoover Dam were the 6 companies, and the Interior Department gave them a lot of control over things, and they prohibited Asian labor directly. In terms of blacks, it was de facto as opposed to anything really written down. They just were not going to hire blacks to work on the dam.
Most people would say this is probably the first instance of the rise of Jim Crow within this valley.
Immediately, the Colored Citizens Labor and Protective Association of Las Vegas teamed up with the local chapter of the NAACP.
And so one of the first significant maneuvers the NAACP chapter of Las Vegas makes is they are going to basically sue the government contractors in a violation of civil rights, effectively.
Out of the 20,000 workers that we are aware of today, only 44 of those workers, over that 4-year period, only 44 were African American.
It was at least a statement that there was an organization within the valley that was ready to respond to the rising tide of racism that started to sweep the West in particular.
1930s is a pivotal point in Las Vegas history. It's that decade that Las Vegas became what it is today. Because prohibition had been taken off the books, and gambling was also legal in Nevada in 1931. And then the building of the dam, which became a tourist magnet. You had those three elements, and the community said, wait a minute, we can become a tourist town.
As more and more people of African descent are appearing in the valley is when you start to see a hardened response from political leaders.
With the new demand for construction and domestic workers, thousands of men and women of all races poured into the valley. This, coupled with the influx of wealthy white tourists, many visiting from the Jim Crow South, the rapidly growing presence of black residents and business owners in the downtown area did not go unnoticed by local businessman Ernie Cragen.
Ernie Cragen was a longtime Las Vegan who had worked for the railroad, and in 1931 he was elected mayor.
By this time, the area west of the tracks established by J.T. McWilliams some 25 years before was known as Old Town or Rag Town due to its crumbling infrastructure. Years of municipal neglect resulted in unpaved roads, no sidewalks or streetlights, and limited sewage and running water, making it a much less desirable place to live than the bustling downtown area just across the tracks. For Mayor Ernie Cragen, this was the perfect solution to his color problem.
If you were black and you owned a business on the east side of the railroad tracks, you don't get your license renewed unless you move.
This was an attempt to force black people to settle in the areas that were already divested from.
Banks are not going to lend you money to buy a house east of the tracks. And Cragen helps drive the effort to make segregation official in Las Vegas.
You literally had to pick up what you had on one side, just even a few blocks away, and settle because the railroad track was the boundary. Tents, shacks, dirt roads, people showering with buckets. African Americans didn't just one day decide we're all going to live over here. And so this is one of the first very firm statements that if black people were going to live in the Las Vegas Valley, it was going to be away from white people and away from the main economic district.
I was 8 years old when I came to Vegas. My parents were from Tallulah, Louisiana. My dad looking for a better life and to find work that paid more money.
A home is basically shelter, your protection against the elements.
It was just a little one-room shack, one room. And
There is a feeling of spaciousness,
we just all lived in the same little room, little house.
a feeling of privacy with a bright, cozy spot for every member of the family.
And then the kids, when we were small kids, we would sleep outside in the summertime because it was cooler.
And during the summer, an air conditioner can be plugged right into a special baseboard outlet.
In that little house we had, you could raise the side of it almost like a tent to let air through the screen.
When modern electric switches are installed in your home, it comes right to your fingertips.
No, I don't think we had electricity. I think we had oil lamps, kerosene lamps.
have a mayor who is being a racist and is not excited about sending funds, fixing streets. West Las Vegas would be at the bottom of the checklist.
There was this idea amongst the city governments that eventually people will just get fed up and go.
With the clear message that the city government was simply not going to help the residents with the infrastructure of the West Side, the men and women in the community began to do for self. Before long, tents, shacks, and empty lots became houses, apartments, and places of worship.
My mother, with the help of family friends, they laid the foundation for my mother's house, just a beautiful little four-room home. We had an outhouse. That was before the sewer lines and the streets and the sidewalks and the gutters were put in.
My mom we had a little house with 2 bedrooms and outside a toilet, but it was outside. It did flush, thank God. But you know, at night you didn't go to the bathroom because you were afraid to go out in the dark.
It was a little house. It was 2 bedrooms, and I had 2 sisters. It was crowded.
The neighborhood in West Las Vegas during that time, we did originally have an outhouse and no running water in the home as a very small child. And my dad later determined, after getting employment, to build our own home. But those early days, there were a lot of small, they used to be called shotgun houses.
My family consisted of 5 girls and 1 boy, my mom and dad. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. We had a porch on the back that eventually my dad converted to a bedroom, and when my brother was born, so he had his own bedroom, but the girls shared the bedroom.
At that point, West Las Vegas begins to develop even more, with churches, with schools, with businesses, and that's really the development of how West Las Vegas began.
With black residents mostly out of sight of the tourism sector, Cragin began the practice of aggressive Jim Crow-style policies and encouraged other area business owners to follow suit.
It's hard to know what motivates Cragin exactly, but in 1928 he had opened the El Portal Theater.
It was more than just a movie theater, it was a theater. Had a stage, had an organ, a place where an orchestra, so to speak, but a band could be.
They had the big old high seats, you couldn't see over, you know what I mean? And you had to sit in a certain spot.
So if you went to the El Portal Theater and you're white, you sit in a certain area. If you're black, you're on the sides.
Then they changed and put us in the upstairs, the loges, and they finally figured out that those were the best seats in the theater, so then we could no longer sit up there.
But they do stuff that you knew what they meant or why they were doing it, because they were prejudiced. So we didn't make a habit of going to those places.
In 1944, the Will Maston Trio, featuring a 22-year-old Sammy Davis Jr., made their Las Vegas debut at the El Rancho on the Vegas Strip. They quickly learned that no matter how many sold-out shows they provided for the resort, they were not welcome to gamble, eat, drink, or sleep there, or in any other establishment east of the tracks. One night, young Sammy decided to hail a taxi downtown to catch a movie at the El Portal. Having no idea how things worked in the City of Lights, he was smacked and dragged into the theater lobby by a cowboy hat-laden sheriff for daring to sit in the whites-only section. In 1941, there were just over 8,000 residents in Las Vegas. 178 of them were black, and all confined to the dilapidated West Side. With the growing demand for new resorts in downtown and the Strip, the construction jobs and service positions were steady. That same year, the threat of a march by black workers on Washington, D.C. prompted President Roosevelt to sign Executive Order 8802, bringing an end to hiring discrimination in both military and other federal agencies. And just when it seemed like things were about to get better, The surprise attack at Pearl Harbor caught everyone off guard. America was at war again.
A date which will live in infamy.
There's a mine in Gabbs, Nevada, that produces what can be converted into magnesium. Magnesium was an igniter, and it was good for things like bombs, for starting cars, airplanes, whatever. Well, the military will need this, and to get the magnesium plant going, especially as people are going off to war, Basic Magnesium Incorporated engages in a recruiting campaign, and they concentrate on depressed southern mill towns, Tallulah, Louisiana, and Fordyce, Arkansas. And you have this migration of people who, oh, there are jobs, let's go. And Basic Magnesium hires a significant number of black employees. Then the migration trek continues on into Las Vegas. Okay, here's segregated West Las Vegas.
Oh, before I forget, Ernie Craigan was reelected as mayor in 1943. So, anyway, that same year, black troops on temporary leave from Camp Clipper decided to come to Vegas to enjoy some R&R. Unlike their white military peers, they were immediately informed that their vacation would be limited to the West Side. It didn't matter that they were fighting for this country, and it didn't matter that they were miles away from the Jim Crow South. So appalled were they by the conditions that a full-scale riot broke out. Rocks, bottles, gunshots. In the end, one soldier would lose his life by a policeman's bullet to the gut, while 3 more soldiers and 2 police officers were wounded. This would be the first violent uprising on Las Vegas's West Side, but it wouldn't be the last.
A lot of times when you talk about being raised on the West Side during segregation, people will look at you like it was prison, but it wasn't. It was home.
But we had family gatherings, we had church gatherings, we had Sunday school, Bible class, summer school.
It really was a village because everybody knew everybody. The whole neighborhood would gather for kickball and tag, jump rope.
No crime, nothing like that. Kids play with kids. And mostly we played with Hispanic kids, the Mexican kids. Hispanics, they couldn't go to places either.
There were probably about 10 Mexican families here at the time. They were in basically the same position we were in. They were not any more welcome in other areas than we were. So we pretty much coexisted as friends and neighbors.
My elders, my grandparents were from Mexico. My grandfather, he decided we were going to move to the West Side, which was nothing but little tents. That's what my grandmother told us. My mom and dad were married in 1941. My sister was born in 1942. Then I was born in 1945. My mom started having these children and we ended up with 5 sisters. We all lived on the West Side. Lived with my grandmother on D Street. We had a lot of friends, a lot of black friends, a lot of Mexican friends. It was beautiful. My life has been great.
And while the innocence of childhood protected the West Side youth from the harsh realities of American life, their elders pushed through it. When the Second World War came to an end, Vegas boomed and tourists flocked, providing more jobs for West Side residents. And although these jobs provided decent wages for those who worked them, the black dollar was still not good enough for most white-owned businesses.
I lived between D and E, and we couldn't pass the church or else we would get in trouble. We couldn't go left. We could go right, but we couldn't go left.
What was left?
Jackson Street.
While white locals and visiting tourists were able to enjoy the amenities of the downtown and strip resorts, it was made clear that although black residents could work long hours as maids, cooks, or porters, They were not invited to the party. So you know what they did, right? They did what we do best, our own thing.
I remember going down Jackson Street and it was always people walking from club to club.
Like ants, running back and forth through ants. People walking down Jackson, back and forth.
Oh yeah, there was a Cotton Club, there was the El Morocco Club, there was a Town Tavern, there was a Louisiana Club. These were all on Jackson Street.
I remember the Cove Hotel. I remember the Carver House, Jackson Hotel. We had Love's Cocktail Lounge, Jackson Barbershop, numerous of businesses in what we call the downtown West Side.
Jackson Avenue became the economic heart of Las Vegas's West Side, providing residents with more employment opportunities and the entertainment they had so long been denied.
Jackson Avenue was a no-no for us because we weren't allowed. That was mostly clubs down there. We'd sneak to use the store.
Yeah, we sneak over there and there them girls was in them tight dresses and they was looking good. Their hair was so pretty and I always told my other sister, I said, I want to dress like that. She said, no, you don't.
It was so much traffic on Jackson. It was dangerous for children.
For young people, it was forbidden. That was the nightlife. Go and touch something that you're not supposed to touch.
Were you allowed to hang out on Jackson?
No, my mother was. I was allowed to hang out at Second Baptist Church.
The clubs were thriving. We had hair salons, we had barbershops, we had restaurants that we could go to. It was the hub of the business community in West Las Vegas during those days.
Also known as the Black Strip or the Black Strap, and although not as glamorous, Jackson Avenue provided West Side residents with the same amenities they were forbade elsewhere in the city. From gaming to nightclubs to fine dining, and of course, the absolute best in live entertainment.
Jackson Avenue. It was vibrant. It was filled with life. You might see Sammy Davis Jr., Nat King Cole, and other people who finished their show on the Las Vegas Strip, and now they're on Jackson Avenue, and they're doing a jam session.
If you were looking for action, it was definitely on Jackson.
So there's a person that we should know better. His name was Victor Hugo Green.
In 1936, New York postal worker Victor Hugo Green began publishing the Negro Motorist Green Book. At a time in America where nationwide Jim Crow practices made safe passage for black travelers uncertain, the Green Book served as a guide to inform black travelers of gas stations, repair shops, restaurants, theaters, and boarding houses around the country that would safely accommodate them on the way to their destinations.
So that Green Book has several locations here in Las Vegas, and one was the Harrison House.
In 1942, Genevieve Harrison left her lifelong Texas home and hit the road for Las Vegas. Upon arrival, she immediately bought some land on the west side and had a home built at 1001 F Street. This home would become known as the Harrison House, the premier boarding house for black travelers on the west side.
So when movie stars, performers, and they were African American, they could not stay in a hotel on the Las Vegas Strip. They had to have a place in the black community. Nat King Cole, Sammy Davis Jr., Pearl Bailey, internationally known stars could not stay at the hotels on the Strip.
Okay, the Harrison House is where all of the entertainers stayed, and we always knew when the entertainers were in town. So when Nat Cole was in town, we'd all go walking up and down the street, and of course when he came out, that was the first time we'd pass by. We would walk up and down and back and forth until he finally came out, because he'd come sit out front. He would always come over to the fence and visit with us kids. And he would ask you about your grades and how you're doing in school and if you're being good and whatever. And of course, I'd throw my hand in the air. Well, I'm on the honor roll. The next time he came back, I just happened to have my report card in my back pocket, so.
And it was not the only boarding house in the West Side. It is the only one that's left. And it is on the National Register of Historic Places.
As the 1940s matured toward the 50s, the West Side did the same. In 1946, the neighborhood saw its first black teacher with Mabel Hogard, and a brave World War II veteran named Herman Moody became the city's first black police officer. That same year, the infamous gangster Bugsy Siegel would open the Flamingo Hotel on the Las Vegas Strip. When in 1948, singer-actress Lena Horne demanded that she be allowed to stay in the hotel following her nightly performances there, Bugsy politely agreed and then instructed the maids to burn her used linens each night. Mayor Cragen's Las Vegas was remaining exactly as he envisioned it almost 2 decades before.
At the end of the 1940s, the clear sign that would be putting on the list of racist things that he did, there was an effort to create a black hotel casino at the intersection of Bonanza and Main Street.
Built in 1943, the Nevada Biltmore Hotel boasted 100 rooms as well as a full gaming and liquor license. But due to its far proximity from the other downtown venues, as well as the fact that newer casinos were expanding on the southern end of town on what would become the Las Vegas Strip, the property struggled to stay afloat. As a result, the resort went through a succession of owners, including at one time the great band leader Horace Heidt.
We're going way back to the dawn of time to tell you a story done in rhyme. We'll show you how things used to be.
By the late 1940s, it was gasping for survival.
Then in 1949, a businessman by the name of Eddie Anderson said, I'd like to buy that place. Now, Eddie Anderson was probably in the top 5 well-known, well-liked entertainers in the United States. He played a character on the Jack Benny show called Rochester.
My lifelong friend, Rochester.
And Anderson was an astute businessman and invested in different things and said, I'd like to buy that hotel.
A year before, in 1948, at the height of his career, Anderson had been a headliner alongside Nat King Cole at the Thunderbird Hotel on the Las Vegas Strip. Despite being one of America's top comedic actors, the owner of several successful business ventures, and living in a Los Angeles mansion of his own, he was forced to seek accommodations at the Harrison House on the West Side. After sharing conversations with other black entertainers, he made a decision.
So Eddie Anderson sees this hotel at this spot, and of course, Bonanza, you go through the underpass, the black community was there, West Las Vegas. Anderson sees this spot, sees this hotel, and sees the location, and says, I want to buy the place.
Hiring white local businessman Stanley D. Hunter to be the face of the operation, Anderson made the move to purchase the property. This purchase would be a major move in the young city. Not only would it solve the issue of providing a proper place for visiting black entertainers to enjoy dignified accommodations, and not only would it provide a high-end venue for black residents and tourists outside of the West Side, he would become the first black owner of a major casino in Las Vegas history.
June 1949, the Biltmore Hotel opens as an all-Negro facility. Members of the community say, wait a minute. They call up Cragen. Cragen says, don't worry about it. Cragen calls a special meeting.
An all-Negro facility on that side of the tracks was too much for Mayor Ernie Cragen to bear. So he called in a special favor from City Commissioner Reed Whipple, who was all too happy to oblige.
Okay, you can open up the hotel. We're canceling your gambling license. We're canceling your liquor license. We're in the hotel. Anderson says, I'm looking to have a resort here. 6 weeks after it opened as an all-Negro resort, July 19th, 1949, it closed. But it was a step.
A step. But who was going to take that next step? It would have to be someone without fear, someone courageous, a superhero. Well, 3 years later, in 1952, that superhero would arrive in Las Vegas. Now, when I say superhero, don't go imagining some muscle-bound dude in tights and a cape. Nah. And don't let this cute little face fool you. In a few short years, this little girl right here would grow up to become bad. And not bad meaning bad, but bad meaning good. Frida J. McDonald was born in St. Louis in 1906. At age 11, she watched helplessly as white mobs burned down the houses of her neighbors. By 13, she was making a full-time living as a performer in the vaudeville Chitlin circuit. At 15, she was married. And by age 19, she had had enough of America's obsession and hatred for her skin, catching a one-way boat ride to France to start a new life. And with that new life, she needed a new name. Switching her first name with her middle name and adopting her husband's surname, Frida J. McDonald became Josephine Baker. Now let me tell you just how bad she was. Immediately upon her arrival in France, she was a sensation. And I'm talking Madonna, Janet, Beyonce levels. Ernest Hemingway couldn't stop talking about her. Pablo Picasso painted portraits of her. She took France by storm. When she was 21 years old, she became the first Black American woman to star in a feature film. She even copped herself a 400-year-old 21-room chateau. The French press dubbed her the Creole Goddess, the Black Pearl, the Bronze Venus. Here was a country that viewed her complexion as an added benefit to her talent. Josephine was bad. She was so bad that when the Nazis showed up in France, even they didn't mess with her, allowing her to move about the country freely, which also enabled her to smuggle their secrets to French intelligence, either by passing messages in her sheet music using invisible ink or hiding classified documents in her panties. Josephine was bad. In that 400-year-old 21-room chateau, if she wasn't using it to smuggle weapons to the French resistance, she was using it to provide shelter for Jewish refugees. Josephine was a superhero. And in April of 1952, she brought those superpowers to Las Vegas.
The initial night, from what people say, is there wasn't a significant problem, but the casino operators in the Last Frontier were not willing to allow Black audience members on a second night.
Knowing the games they played, Baker had it firmly stated in her contract that not only would she be given first-rate accommodations at the resort itself, but also that each performance would cater to an integrated audience.
And that was an important statement because it suggested that she wasn't just going to pass through, that she wanted to see how she could help the conditions of Black people in Las Vegas.
Her immediate move was to hail a taxi to Jackson Avenue on the west side. The first mission was to visit each and every beauty salon and barbershop where she personally handed out tickets to the show. The second mission was to contact local NAACP president Woodrow Wilson. No, not that one. This Woodrow Wilson. The backing of the NAACP would guarantee a national spotlight on the discriminatory practices in Las Vegas if her contract wasn't honored. Josephine was playing chess. And that night, when her guests were denied entry at the door,
so she hears what's happening and apparently sits down on the stage when she's supposed to be performing and says into the microphone that she will not perform until her demands are met. So there's this standstill between her and the property owners. They eventually capitulate, allow her guests in, sit them in the front row, and then serve them.
Checkmate. Josephine Baker's short visit to Vegas didn't change the city overnight, but she planted an unstoppable seed. That same year in October, an up-and-coming future legend Harry Belafonte was booked as the opening act at the Thunderbird Hotel. He was told that not only was he to enter and exit the venue by way of the back door, and that his dressing room and rest area would be a curtained-off corner in the kitchen, but he was also barred from mingling with the exclusively white crowds who came to see him. On top of this, his sleeping arrangements were confined to a rundown motel on the west side that smelled of dog urine. And when Belafonte called the Thunderbird, threatening to cancel the contract,
"You listen here, darky, and you listen good. Your job here each night is to sing, dance, and leave. You renege on this agreement. The only way you're going home is in a box. You got that?"
Luckily for Belafonte, he had friends with close connections to New York mob affiliates who were able to make the call to smooth things over. On the final day of his contract, to show just how much he appreciated the treatment, Belafonte removed his shirt and jumped in their whites-only pool. And while the hotel staff freaked out, the white hotel guests crowded Belafonte, asking for pictures and autographs. This was one of many situations that would lead Harry Belafonte to dedicating his life to becoming an activist and leader in the fight for civil rights in the years to come. 2 years later, in March of 1954, the national magazine Ebony wrote an article not only exposing the Jim Crow practices of Vegas resorts, but it also shined a light on the unfair treatment of black residents by city officials. As a result, the city received a new nickname, the Mississippi of the West. By 1955, the Las Vegas population was approximately 56,000 and saw 8 million tourists arrive each year, all willing to leave their hard-earned dollars behind for a good show and a chance to strike it rich. And if it wasn't before, Las Vegas was officially the entertainment capital of the world. And while much of that entertainment was provided by black artists, casino operators held firm to the Jim Crow policy of sing, dance, and leave. As the demand for entertainment grew, so did the city. 1955 saw the opening of 4 new multi-million-dollar resorts: the Dunes Hotel and Casino, the Royal Nevada, and the Riviera, all opening that same year on the Las Vegas Strip. But the 4th resort, that one, was across the tracks.
The Moulin Rouge is important because the spirit of the Moulin Rouge still exists. And that spirit was an integrated resort in Las Vegas. It was only open for 6 months.
The Moulin Rouge was different. It was high-end. It was Academy Awards. It was Grammys all wrapped up in one. Well, my grandparents were at that opening. I was 6 or 7 years old. And I remember everybody getting all dressed to kill.
The Moulin Rouge was a very big deal in the community. It was the first large hotel away from the Strip. And I can recall the excitement in West Las Vegas regarding the Moulin Rouge being built and what it was going to do for the West Las Vegas community in terms of jobs and what it would bring to the community. So it was a very big deal at the time that it was built.
I was about 10 years old, and it was a big to-do. The fact that it was open to especially West Side residents, but it was a big deal. We were proud of it. I was.
Themed after the famed Moulin Rouge in Paris, the resort was the first in the United States to welcome both white and black patrons,
as well as offering black residents an equal chance at better paying front-of-the-house jobs.
As a structure, the Moulin Rouge in many ways mirrored what you would see in downtown, but it was on the west side. And because the west side historically had been ignored by the city fathers, this was a big deal to put it on Bonanza Road.
And here are black and white in the same building, just having fun, eating, drinking, dancing, watching a show. It's a wonderful thing to contemplate.
While the rest of the tourist traps went on with business as usual, the Moulin Rouge was busy becoming the place to be for both stargazers and the stars themselves. If it wasn't the food, prepared by some of the best chefs in the world, it was the shows. Recruiting the legendary Harlem Renaissance-era choreographer Clarence Robinson, the nightly shows quickly became the talk of the town. His productions of the Tropicana and the Watusi not only brought an energy and flavor to the Vegas stage that the city had never seen before, it would also go on to inspire a hit song and a national teenage dance craze in the 1960s.
Watusi!
The shows featured an all-black cast, hand-picked and imported from all over North America.
I think Clarence Robinson, I think he found us and got us to go on the show with him. And after that, we worked with him constantly. And we got the call that we're going to Las Vegas. And we were really ecstatic.
I was dancing in Toronto, and Joe Louis was going to be the host at the Moulin Rouge. And so he asked me if I'd like to work there and told me that when it opened, he would let me know. And that's what he did. Clarence was from New York, and the girls that came from New York and he were on the same plane, and that very same plane stopped in Chicago and picked the Chicago girls up. So we were all on the same plane.
When we first got here, I think they just had cars or taxis for us. I can't remember which one they had it. So we're passing by the strip, and we're getting excited because we're seeing all the lights. And then it kept on going, and we started looking at each other. And then we always heard that story about across the railroad tracks. Then we kind of slumped down in our seats. We just got sick. But then we turned the corner.
Well, it was exciting. It looked huge. I mean, years later when I looked at it, it seemed so small.
It was like a half a block long. It was just absolutely beautiful. It was all lit up. It was really just lovely. It was really wonderful.
Before long, every strip headliner, black or white, was heading to the Moulin Rouge after completing their midnight shows. Frank Sinatra, Pearl Bailey, Tallulah Bankhead, Judy Garland, George Burns, Nat King Cole, and Jack Benny were just a few. On June 20th of 1955, just 1 month after opening, the Moulin Rouge made the cover of Life magazine.
It's getting national attention, the cover of Life magazine. And today, that seems less significant than it was then. That was of incredible significance in 1955.
And to me, that was the beginning of the end of the Moulin Rouge, because the whole world now got to see and know about this property. There's some serious mob stuff going on, it's competition, these other properties on the strip that probably cost more money to build, to not get the cover. And then when you read the article, they was like, oh, the Riviera was nice, it was a little lackluster at the pool, da-da-da-da. But when they spoke about the Moulin Rouge, they was like, the excitement was bananas, the show was crazy.
And just like that, in October of that same year, the party came to an end.
Came to work just like any other time and couldn't get in. Had no clue.
We went to the Moulin Rouge to go to work, and it's a padlock on the door.
While there's no doubt that the Moulin Rouge was a source of envy from other Vegas resorts, it turns out that almost from the time it opened its doors, there was trouble in paradise.
I don't think that there was enough oversight, enough business people that were at the end of the day, and the money was going out faster than it was coming in.
In the end, unpaid contractors, scorned investors, infighting, and lawsuits would be the resort's undoing.
Well, it was really an exciting time. We thought it was going to last a long time. It was kind of sad that it didn't last a long time. Quite a shock.
I think the Moulin Rouge contributes to the civil rights movement in Las Vegas. Oh yeah, well, yeah, they had money at the Moulin Rouge, and they have money. And maybe the color that matters most is not black or white, but green.
By 1960, despite President Eisenhower's signing of the Civil Rights Bill that year, Las Vegas had been too set in her ways. With the city's black population tucked safely behind the tracks, business and tourism could continue as normal.
Even though segregation had been very severe here in Las Vegas, integration takes place before it does countrywide. We know that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 integrates the country, where here integration takes place in March of 1960. The NAACP in New York sends out a letter to all the branches all around the country. That letter comes to the president of the NAACP here in Las Vegas. His name is James B. McMillan. He receives the letter and he acts immediately.
Dr. McMillan made sure the word got out to both casino heads and city officials. If Las Vegas refused to drop its Jim Crow policies, Black Las Vegans would march in large numbers through downtown and the Strip, alerting tourists and the world of the injustices of the city. That's when the calls began. Threatening phone calls from local racists and mafia affiliates. And Wilbur Jackson, just one of 3 black officers with the police department, sent a reminder to the mafia that although they were tough on the east side of the tracks, they didn't stand a chance on the west side. Eventually, this would lead to a meeting at the site of the Moulin Rouge on Bonanza between Dr. McMillan, local activists, politicians, and casino heads. And on March 25th of 1960, a deal was struck. This would become known as the Moulin Rouge Agreement and guaranteed full access for black residents and tourists to enjoy the Vegas amenities previously withheld from them. Finally, a victory. And the 1960s would produce a few victories for Black Las Vegas. The city would get a second black physician with the arrival of Dr. John Creer. Former Moulin Rouge MC Bob Bailey and former dancer and writer Alice Key would begin filming Talk of the Town and The Bob Bailey Show in the lobby of the Carver House on Jackson Avenue. They would become the country's first entertainment variety shows to be completely produced, directed, and featuring an all-black cast.
When is the first time you played here, Sammy?
1944.
1944.
1944, and you couldn't, in those days, Bob, you could not, you had to enter into the club in the back door. I was at the old rancho.
The 1960s started off full of hope for Black America. But as the decade wore on, things started to get dark. Really dark.
I have some very sad news for all of you, and that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
The assassination of the very symbol of peaceful black protests for many was the last straw. Nationwide riots ensued. Calls from elders to black youth to maintain King's legacy of nonviolent protest fell on deaf ears. As far as they were concerned, they had tried it King's way. This new generation had a whole different approach. In October of 1969, after a family altercation with the police went bad, the West Side erupted with violence and a full-scale riot ensued. Police blamed the youth, and the youth blamed police. One of the local news reporters sent to cover the situation was a young Bob Stoddall.
So when the anger hit Las Vegas and there was trouble in the streets, and I went over to to cover it. It's daytime. It's about 11, 12 o'clock. Park my car. Streets are pretty empty. Some kids come out in the street, maybe about 4 or 5, and the next thing I know, rocks are hitting my car. I just said, wait, why are they doing this to me? I live here. I finally got that sense of that anger, of that had been brewing. It had been there from the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. The anger door had opened.
In the end, the Golden West Shopping Center, the largest on the west side and one of the biggest in the city, was partially destroyed by fire and would remain that way for over a decade.
Historically, activism has always been a part of our sojourn in America. When you look at history, you can't name a period where Black people were not a part of some form of resistance.
The late 1960s and early 70s saw a surge of revolutionary groups throughout the country. People, both black and white, were fed up with the established political and social norms of the country and its treatment of marginalized groups. But none were more visible than the Black Panther Party. Often vilified by mainstream media sources, the Panthers are most remembered for their outspoken position on the Second Amendment and violent clashes with law enforcement. Rarely discussed are their egalitarian contributions to black and brown communities across the country. Before the public education system recognized the importance of children being fed before school, the Panthers were the first to create breakfast programs. Clothing banks, free ambulance service, free health clinics, and employment referral services were just a few of the many operations the Panthers implemented in marginalized communities across the country.
Bunchy Creer was the founder of the second chapter of the Las Vegas Black Panther Party. Being the son of the second black doctor, he would come back and forth from Oakland to Las Vegas.
Because everybody talk about the free breakfast program, but to me, one of the most important programs we had was sickle cell anemia, because the Black Panther Party was the one that brought it to the forefront. Nobody knew about or talked about sickle cell anemia.
We had to escort seniors to go cash their checks and to get back to their houses safely. It was called the Safe Streets program.
We would do voter registration. The thing about the party, you didn't have to come to us like say with sickle cell, like with all our programs. We'd take it to the people. You know, go to apartments, or if somebody's having a function, we'd test. The same thing with the voter registration.
And participated a lot with the welfare rights, Ruby Duncan, Irma O'Neill.
When civil rights lightning rods Ruby Duncan, Aldine Weems, Alversa Bills, Mary Wesley, and others decided to storm the Las Vegas Strip to protest unnecessary cuts to welfare assistance to single mothers, the Las Vegas Panther Party had their backs.
I would say the women of the community were the movers and shakers.
As nationwide integration began to change the national culture, and after years of FBI counterintelligence interference, the Black Panther Party slowly descended into obscurity. And at that very same time, the FBI would turn a blind eye to a few rapidly growing neighborhood street gangs in LA, as well as the new product that would empower them to spread their own philosophies to black neighborhoods everywhere.
The Playboys,
Gerson Park.
You had the 50 Crips,
West Coast,
the Brownie Boys,
Crip City on the other side,
the BTDs.
Oh, I remember Pyru.
You can't talk about the 80s and 90s in the west side of Northtown without, talking about the gangbangers.
You had the Rolling 60s.
Well, you got to tell your mama, don't go to the store. What you mean, I'm going to the store? I've been going to the store all my life. No, mama, you can't go to the store now.
All the parties got shot up. We had a little brother complex with LA. It was a collective effort to be as rough as LA.
I didn't really gangbang, but I was affiliated with them. Like, if you were to ask me back then, I probably said I was, but I was never into it because I didn't fully understand the brotherhood that they claimed that they were having, because I had both of my parents, you know, so I wasn't out there looking for love.
I'm kind of unique because I'm from the West Side, like born and raised. So before the gang culture really kicked off like that, I had like a head start because some of my family lived in basically every neighborhood. So I ain't really have it that tough.
Just say no.
In the disco era of the 1970s, cocaine became the #1 drug of choice for American partygoers. By the late 70s, Central American cartels were importing so much powder that the street price plummeted. But when underworld chemists discovered an inexpensive process to purify the drug and make it smokable, traffickers saw hope for a new market. While powder cocaine was known as a rich man's drug and was distributed mainly amongst middle-class and wealthy circles, this new smokable rock form of cocaine was affordable to anyone.
This is crack cocaine. It's turning our cities into battle zones.
I swear, when crack hit the neighborhood, when crack hit Las Vegas, it was a switch. I swear one day, I saw fathers leave, parents not being home, kids going astray.
Los Angeles gangs used profits from the drug to expand their distribution networks to black neighborhoods throughout the U.S. And with Vegas being so close by, it was a natural first stop for many of them.
I think that the drugs that came in that time really fused the gangbanging, because before then you could really move around from different neighborhoods to neighborhoods.
The crack epidemic had begun, and nowhere in the city felt its effects more than the once thriving Jackson Avenue.
The money left, the professional blacks left, and the drugs came in.
Business owners on Jackson Street, starting in the 1980s, found that the elements in the community did not allow them to remain the entrepreneurs that they were. They couldn't control those businesses any longer. Mrs. Love, whose family owned Love's Cocktail Lounge, told me that her husband could not control the street element any longer. Crack cocaine had changed the community in such a horrible way.
Before long, Jackson became a shell of what it used to be. One by one, the businesses that had for so long sustained the area began to disappear. But despite these growing challenges on the West Side, there were still those with enough faith to invest.
Once I had become a baccarat dealer at the MGM, realized that now from the stardust and the kind of money that a dealer makes, now I started to convince people that was around me, like my uncle who drove the school bus, my little cousin who worked in the hotel in the kitchen, and another friend of mine who was a porter. In talking, look, we all making money, man. We need to start putting some money together so that, make some investments. And everybody agreed. I was more interested in doing something to uplift the West Side community.
By this time, the Golden West Shopping Center had sat in ruins for more than a decade since the riots of 1969. Where banks and other investors saw a trash heap, Mr. Edmond and his partners saw opportunity.
Right after we bought it, we decided to change the name to Nucleus Plaza.
After a whole lot of money and some elbow grease, John Edmond and his partners had resurrected the shopping center, once again providing the neighborhood with a grocery store and much-needed community services. And it would remain that way for a while.
The defendants being congratulated as the verdict, not guilty, rang through the packed courtroom.
When 4 LAPD officers were found not guilty after beating unarmed motorist Rodney King on film, all hell broke loose.
Listening and watching the verdict was a slap in the face.
You're looking at it.
All of this proof. We're looking at this proof.
Loss of control downtown too, a lot of disruption.
So now there was just people begin to start accumulating around Big 8, the supermarket. There's probably like about 8, 10 guys. Now they're going to break in the store. Now they break into the store, and now they looting. The riots, the fire and all that started from the front, from them throwing the Molotovs into the store. This is after they in looting, they throwing fire bombs and all that. So
it made no sense for us to burn down Big 8. My grandmother had us sit on the fence and says, look at what we're doing to our own community. Burning down things that we need. We're gonna need milk and bread tomorrow.
What are we really doing? Because we not tearing their stuff down, we tearing our stuff down.
Once the blaze got up so high, it was a young person, I understand, that had gotten trapped in there. But the back door was padlocked and locked down to where you couldn't get out the door from the front. I was hurt. I was really, really hurt because it had taken me 10 years or so to build up from the early riot. I was hurt more to the fact that this just don't look good from the outside point of view of how we are destroying our own neighborhood, our own community.
And after receiving the insurance payout from all the destruction,
so I still got 2/3 of the shopping center left. Could have just bulldozed that area down and made a pad or something later, or still had 3/4 of the shopping center to work with, but that was not what my original intention was. And now I'm really more or less kind of really now want to, once I done gathered my thoughts, to make a difference, so I'm gonna rebuild.
As a result of the 1992 riots, unlike John Edmond, many business owners chose not to rebuild, moving away to other parts of the city.
Everybody else who could afford to move out of the Black community, they did as well. So that was the end of Black communities as we knew it at the time.
Sometime in the 1990s, the late great wordsmith Tupac Shakur wrote a poem titled "The Rose That Grew from Concrete." During those same years, many West Side youths resisted or fell victim to the gangs, drugs, or other dead-end vices. Addiction, prison, death. And even in those conditions, as hard as concrete, there were still roses that grew.
There was a lot of gang activity, a lot of folks suffer from drug addiction. I even have, folks in my own family who suffer from drug addiction. I dropped out of school when I was 16. I had a kid when I was 16.
I grew up around that. It was something that others in my family experienced. My mother is a recovering drug addict and now celebrating 30 years of her recovery. But as a kid growing up, that's really what I was exposed to. My father was shot and killed when I was a freshman in college on the corner of Lake Mead and Ingolstadt.
I came from a good home. I had both my parents, which was very uncommon. A lot of my friends, they didn't have both parents in the household. I grew up in a household with mature parents. My mother and my father had me when they were 40 years old, and we didn't understand each other. Well, they understood me because they've been my age, but I just didn't understand where they were coming from, which I guess led me to rebelling. I didn't want to be, what they thought that I should have been. I really chose my environment, and it was my fault for going through what I went through in my life, because it didn't have to be so hard. It didn't have to be so difficult. I didn't have to drop out of school. I didn't have to, go through this dark and, vicious path to getting to where I am today.
There have been pivotal moments throughout my life that have helped inform why I do what I do. Obviously, the death of my father, my mom's recovery, my own finding my own voice in community.
But I made the decision to go back to get my high school diploma in 2012 at 24 years old.
Nevada Democrats have elected their first African-American party chairman. William McCurdy II is also the youngest chairman in the state party's history at 28. McCurdy is a Las Vegas native who represents District 6.
a lot of people supported me throughout those years when I didn't have a lot of support. And so I believed in wanting to give that back.
Democrat Stephen Horsford has just announced he is claiming victory and has been declared the winner in his race for Congressional District 4, beating Jim Marchand.
I was born and raised here in Las Vegas, right at Southern Memorial Hospital, which is now UMC. My parents, like many people, migrated from the South. First black doctor, Dr. Charles West, heard about my father at Irvine and asked him to come out and help him with his practice in Las Vegas. I do.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Another 4 years. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. We created what's called the 100 Plan, and HUNDRED, which stands for Historic Urban Neighborhood Redevelopment. And then when I got in office, that plan had just been sort of sitting there like many plans before. I said, look, we are not going to let this plan just sit there and rot. We're going to go back out to the community. We're going to get our team on board, and we came back out, updated that plan to create the 100 Plan in action.
So I think with Cedric Creer, and I think with William and Congressman Horsford and those particular men, they have not just been talking, they have produced. And I think if we keep those men working together, I think we will see true economic development happen in the historic West Las Vegas.
The historic West Side, to me, and as far as I can remember, was family-oriented, God-fearing. We went to church. We were fellowshipping all the time.
The historic West Side in the 1980s was incredible. It was very commutable. I don't even know if that's a word, but let's make it one.
It really didn't matter if you lived on the West Side. The West Side was the mecca for all black people when we was coming up. So you're getting your hair cut, you're picking your laundry up, you're going to get your curl done. You know what I mean? Your auntie over there doing your grandmama hair. You're going to Mario's, your grandfather got to get that hog head cheese, you know what I mean?
West Side is everything. West Side is culture. West Side is where we started, where we grew our businesses and things like that. So it's important to me to help maintain that.
So now my passion is definitely uplifting a community that's been underserved for far too long. I'm now the executive director of the Abodo Collective.
Abodo means community in Igbo. So the Igbo people historically were egalitarian, you know what I mean? What was for the betterment and the development of everyone.
We're a local nonprofit that is focusing on providing supports and long-term solutions to eliminate multi-generational poverty.
All of these young children, my grandchildren, your grandchildren, come back into the community, buy the land. It is there for you to buy, and nobody told you to leave it anyway. What I want for the West Side, I want children to grow up, become strong adults who go back and help children behind them become strong adults. I believe everybody has greatness. And sometimes you might have to have a mentor or someone who can show you who you are.
Blacks migrated to Las Vegas as early as everyone else did. We did the jobs in the back of the house that allowed people to come here and enjoy great vacations, enjoy luxury. And then we came out of the back of the house and we continued to build this city. We engaged in every working opportunity available, and we're still doing it. We are still building a city.
This has been an American story. It's not unique by any means. Detroit, Los Angeles, Minneapolis, Miami, you name it. They all got the same story. But this one was ours.
you.